in my tradition of being able to combine seemingly unrelated topics when it comes to game design. For today, we're going to be discussing how game designers can take notes from the hit anime and manga JoJo's Bizarre Adventure when it comes to designing a game around asymmetrical elements. I'll give a special shout out to any fans of the series watching this video right now, thanks to the thumbnail art. If you enjoy game design, then stick around. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in. But other than that, let's get on with our topic. Asymmetrical design has been a part of some of the more interesting titles released over the last few decades in the game industry. And it's also one of the hardest things to do right, thanks to the very nature of the fact that asymmetrical design cannot really be balanced. Now, in previous videos, we've talked about the idea of asymmetry when it comes to a video game. And that is when players of a competitive variety will have access to different abilities or options that the other one doesn't. And it works more on a scale than it does a black or white kind of nature. On the low end of the scale, we could talk about games that allow players to choose different guns, such as in a FPS. High on the scale would be CCGs, fighting games, any game where you can have completely different abilities or options that one player or one group doesn't have. And at probably the highest would be something like Left 4 Dead or Evolve, where you have two player groups fighting against each other with completely different systems of play, or even something like Natural Selection. Now, when it comes to asymmetrical design, the reason why it's so difficult to do right is that balance is pretty much impossible. It's not a case of apples to oranges, it's more like comparing railroads to penguins. And when developers go down this road, they can sometimes run into issues when it comes to figuring out, is something too good, or is the player base just having trouble figuring it out? Not to mention when it comes to having to actually balance different options, as with cases such as CCGs and MOBAs. Now, the reason for our discussion about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, or how it's framing today's video, is that while the anime was not written with game design in mind, as of course, as we all know, I'm running footage of a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure game in the corner there, it does feature several major hooks of what makes asymmetrical design work and how to approach it from a design standpoint. Now, going over what the anime and manga are, that is way beyond the purpose of this video, and there are people who have done much better jobs than I would ever do all over the internet. But, just as, I guess, from the layman's point of view, the anime deals with characters who have special abilities called stands. They come in the form of creatures that appear besides them, and each stand, as per battle anime rule, has some kind of special power or gift to it. And there is a wide assortment of things that go along in the anime, in the anime and manga when it comes to these powers. And this got more and more crazy, or I guess I should use the term bizarre here, over the course of the franchise, which I believe at this moment in time is up to, I think, Series 8. But don't quote me on that one. But how it works in terms of asymmetrical design, what developers can learn from it, is based on three different areas of trying to build a character or build an option. And we'll talk about them more when we get to our second part of this video. But to summarize again why asymmetrical design is so difficult, especially when you look at video games that have gone about, is that when you're dealing with two or more abilities that have no equal or no basis in terms of their foundation, it doesn't become a case of pure power. For instance, going back to Left 4 Dead, what is stronger or what is more overpowered? The boomer going off and blinding an entire crew of people? Or the smoker getting a pull and knocking a character off an edge? Both can be devastating when used properly, but neither one of them will be considered just completely unbeatable. And keep that in the back of your minds, as we'll be talking more about this in the next minute or so. But when we look at most games that use asymmetrical design some way, shape, or form, it's typically being built on a foundation. And the two best examples would probably be, again, CCG and MOBAs. When it comes to mobile design, every character in a game, be it Dota, LoL, Smite, or any other one of those games you can think of, is built on a pre-selected foundation. What's their role? Is it a jungle, tank, support, assault, whatever? And then they come out with like 3 different powers and usually an ultimate. And then that's basically the blueprint for every character in the game. It then becomes about trying to figure out, how do we make these individual aspects unique or different from one another? And part of the issues when it comes to designs like this is that the more characters you add in, the more things you have to juggle. Something that was considered overpowered or amazing 5 patches ago may not be considered that great when you introduce a character who could be a pure counter to it. And what happens when you have a character come out that has a very weird or unique ability that nobody's figuring out, but the developers know that it is flat out OP? And that actually raises a question I want to throw out before we switch to our second part. From a design standpoint, if the developers know that something is overpowered, but the fan base doesn't see it as such, do you change that? And of course, by proxy, if the fan base is saying that something is overpowered, but it's not from a design standpoint, what do you do in that case? Now, those 2 questions are a basis for probably another video that we may come back to in the future. But for any developers watching, I want to get your thoughts on that. But with that said, we're going to do a quick shout out to our Patreon supporters and backers. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the 3 key areas of asymmetrical design and how JoJo's Bizarre Adventure shows that off. And now for a quick thank you to our Patreon supporters and current Game Wisdom sponsors. If you would like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, link down below. While we continue with the footage from the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Eyes of Heaven game, let's talk a little bit more about these areas where asymmetrical design shines and what you need to pay attention to if you're designing your own game. So the first point is one that we've kind of talked about already. When it comes to asymmetrical design, every choice should be overpowered. And that, again, is a great example of what we see here with the anime and manga. In the franchise, there are characters who have featured abilities that are just insane in terms of what they do and how hard it was for the principal cast to defeat them. And when it comes to video games, you have to consider that as well. One of the key aspects of many CCG-based games, especially those that feature factions or specific abilities tied to like a different element or whatever, is that each element or choice should be over the top. It should be something that nobody else has access to. Going back to, for instance, real-time strategy design, the whole point of the beauty of StarCraft, as an example, is that each faction has very overpowered elements to it. The Protoss get those nasty Dark Templars who can run around cutting up enemies and they can't be seen because they're cloak. Zergs get massive Ultralisks and just the Swarm. The Terrans get Stim-Pack Marines and Firebats, and you get the picture. With that said, though, it's the second point that really becomes a big aspect of asymmetrical design. And that is, everything must be overpowered, as we've said, but it can only be overpowered in a specific situation. There should never be something that is just overpowered all the time. And getting back to the anime here, one of the reasons for its popularity in terms of the depth of its combat when you see people fight is that each character is overpowered in a specific way. Anyone who's, as you've watched characters such as JoJo over here, He is incredibly powerful when it comes to close range combat, as his stand here likes to punch things very, very fast, as you can see right there. But he's not good in long range. That would be someone like our friend Kakion here. Now, I'm pretty sure I just butchered that as well, so any Jojo Bizarre Adventure fans still watching, please don't yell at me too much. But when it comes to game design, this is a major point, that asymmetrical design is all about winning using your advantage. Now, your advantage should not work 100% of the time, and that is one of the greatest challenges behind asymmetrical design. That most designers will say that, on average, you should be able to win 50% of the time with your advantage. If I'm fire base and you have a water deck that I'm strong against, I should have the advantage. But with that said though, you should not be able to win 100%, because when that happens, then you run into cases of the design solidifying. If I know that every time you have a water deck that fire wins automatically, that's going to create a set meta, and nobody wants that. Going back to the anime here, again, with the various characters and their abilities, while they are strong or weak in certain conditions, it always falls back on them doing something to get the opponent outmaneuvered, or surprise them in a way to land a solid blow or a hit to win. And that is asymmetrical design at its finest. Going back to what I was saying regarding the Left 4 Dead examples, the smoker and the boomer can be overpowered, but in specific situations. The boomer works great in close encounters or when the enemy's distracted. When that happens, it's very easy to say that the boomer is overpowered. He completely blinds the entire team, the other special infected go in, and they win. The problem, though, is that when the boomer is not in that situation, they're a lot harder to play, and many times the boomer is going to fail without backup. Now, with that said, the third major aspect beyond asymmetrical design, and this one is probably unique to game design, while the other two we could fit into the anime and manga here. But the third one is that asymmetrical design must always be allowed, or there should never be a situation that completely shuts it off. This is an issue that we see more in abstracted games, especially RPG designs, that give the player a lot of choice in terms of how to build their character, what spells or skills to choose, things like that. The more you have, the more that you have to be accommodating for in the game space. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're playing an RPG, and you allow the character to choose between fire, water, earth, and wind as a spell type. Okay, that doesn't sound too bad. But then let's say at one point in the game, every character must go through a dungeon that's full of fire-immune enemies. Well, that character who's using fire, well, they're kind of in deep trouble. And a major part of asymmetrical design along these lines kind of leads us into a talk about emergent gameplay, and designing tools and abilities that can work in multiple roles and functions that can lead to unique ways of getting around things. Games such as Dishonored and Prey being really great cases. But that is again another topic that is far beyond what we'll be talking about in today's piece. To begin to wrap things up though, asymmetrical design, when it works, can lead to some very original design and very popular games. But it's very hard to do right. And even with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure here, and what we discuss in terms of these three roles or these three aspects, even with that said, we haven't seen too many games go down this route. And again, the reason has to do with balance. How powerful should somebody's advantage be? And this is a philosophical point that we could spend the next 20 minutes or so discussing. In my written post about this, so there should be a link to it down below when it goes up, I posed this question. Let's say I am the greatest player in a first-person shooter, and I'm using the best sniper rifle in the game. You come at me and you get close enough with a shotgun. Should my skill be able to beat you at that range? Or should your innate advantage beat me even if you are not as good at the game as I am? And there are strong arguments for both sides of things there. And the same thing when it comes to asymmetrical design. And we all know Blizzard has probably spent many hours weighing this decision when it came to StarCraft and StarCraft 2. If something is so original and powerful, but at the same time nobody has found a way to beat it, should it still be allowed? And conversely, if there is an option that people are enjoying, but it is horrible and needs to be buffed, do you buff that, or do you nerf everything else around it? And I know what all the designers down below are going to say. You're going to say to buff everything around it. But again, that raises the problem when it comes to asymmetrical design. We're not dealing with comparative elements. What's more powerful? The ability to summon pets, or the ability to shoot fireballs out of your hand? There's no answer to that because you can't compare those two in a vacuum. You have to see how things work in game. And again, going back to those 3 points, everything should be overpowered. It should be overpowered in a specific way, so not great all the time. And the game space must accommodate all these crazy and unique powers so that the player is never at a position where they are completely useless. But with that said, to end this video on, one final question for you watching. Can you think of games that did an amazing job of having asymmetrical design? And can you think of those that failed? And why did they? But thank you so much for watching this video. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed this footage of JJBA, because we probably won't be seeing it too much in the future here on the channel. But again, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you all next time. If you're looking for a book on design, my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, is out now. It is available where most books are sold, and it comes in paper, hardcover, or digital copies. This is the perfect book for anyone interested in learning about game design, whether you are a student, enthusiast, or just a fan. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoy things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.